Long before the first wheel ever rolled across the earth, ancient civilizations were already carving pathways through mountains, deserts, and dense forests, roads so precisely engineered, they defy logic even today. Picture this: massive stones carefully aligned over vast distances, pathways cutting through impossible terrain, all without the technology we take for granted. How did they do it, and why? These roads weren't just practical routes, they were monuments to human ingenuity, hidden maps of the cosmos, and perhaps even messages meant to outlast time itself. Some of these ancient roads stretch for hundreds of miles, their angles and curves following patterns we're only beginning to decode. Think about the sheer effort hauling stones weighing tons, aligning them with celestial events, all without modern tools or even the wheel to lighten the load. What drove these cultures to invest so much in these pathways? Were they sacred pilgrimages, trade routes, or something far more mysterious? The answers might lie in the stones themselves, whispering secrets to those who know how to listen. Today, we're uncovering 30 of these forgotten roads, each one a puzzle waiting to be solved. From the sun-baked trails of the Andes to the shadowy corridors beneath Europe's oldest forests, we'll trace their hidden logic, explore their cultural echoes, and piece together the stories they left behind. This isn't just a journey through history, it's a chance to walk in the footsteps of the ancients, to see the world through their eyes, and to marvel at what they achieved against all odds. So let's step onto these ancient paths together, where every turn reveals another clue, and every mile holds a mystery begging to be unraveled. One of the most breathtaking examples of ancient road building lies in the heart of Mesopotamia, the Great Processional Way of Babylon. Stretching nearly half a mile, this wasn't just a path for travel, it was a dazzling spectacle of color and precision. Imagine walking on a road paved with glazed blue bricks, their surfaces shimmering under the sun, each one etched with golden lions and dragons. This wasn't mere decoration, it was a carefully crafted stage for grand ceremonies, designed to awe anyone who walked it. But the real magic lies in the road's hidden geometry. Unlike straight Roman roads built centuries later, the processional way curved slightly, almost like a river flowing toward the legendary Ishtar Gate. Scholars think this curve was deliberate, guiding ceremonial marches in a sacred rhythm. Even more astonishing, the road's angle aligned with the rising sun during key festivals, turning the entire pathway into a celestial calendar. What's truly remarkable is how the Babylonians balanced practicality with spiritual symbolism. The same road that carried kings and priests during religious processions also served as a vital artery for trade and communication. Every brick, every angle, every symbol was a fusion of science and faith, proof that for ancient engineers, roads weren't just about getting from one place to another. They were about connecting earth to sky, humanity to the divine. Today, fragments of the processional way still whisper its secrets. Archaeologists have found traces of its glittering bricks, some still bearing the claw marks of the lions that once lined the route. These remnants tell us something profound. Long before the wheel, humans were already mapping the heavens onto the earth, turning simple paths into something far greater. The next time you walk down a straight, modern street, pause for a moment and wonder what it might look like if we still built roads to touch the stars. While Babylon's processional way dazzled with its artistry, the Inca road system achieved something even more staggering. A sprawling network stretching over 24,000 miles, weaving through some of the most treacherous landscapes on Earth. Imagine a highway system built without wheels, iron tools, or even written language, yet so precise that parts of it still stand today, defying earthquakes and centuries of neglect. This wasn't just a feat of engineering. It was the lifeline of an empire, connecting mountaintop citadels like Machu Picchu to bustling coastal cities and remote jungle outposts. What made these roads extraordinary wasn't just their scale, but their adaptability. Instead of forcing straight lines onto the landscape like later European colonizers, the Incas worked with the land. Their roads hugged cliffs, zigzagged up mountainsides, and even crossed rushing rivers on suspension bridges woven from grass, a material so strong, Spanish conquistadors initially refused to believe it could hold their horses. These weren't arbitrary choices. By following natural contours, the Incas minimized erosion, a lesson modern engineers are only now rediscovering, but the real genius lay in the details. Those sharp zigzags you see on steep slopes, they weren't just for gradual ascent. Recent research suggests they were defensive masterstrokes, forcing potential invaders to slow down while Inca warriors could move swiftly via hidden staircases. And the road's angles, many align with solstice sunrises or sacred mountains, turning entire routes into spiritual pathways. Even the spacing of way stations or tambos was calculated precisely, a day's walk apart, stocked with supplies, and often positioned near springs or shrines. The Incas called their empire Tawantinsuyu, the land of the four quarters, and these roads were the threads that held it together. Runners called chasquis relayed messages at speeds rivaling ancient telegraphs, while llamas carried everything from maize to gold. Yet for all their practicality, these roads were never just utilitarian. Traces of crushed seashells in the mortar, offerings buried beneath stones, and carefully placed viewpoints framing sacred peaks all whisper the same truth. To the Incas, every journey was a pilgrimage, every step a dialogue between earth and sky. Today, hiking a surviving stretch of the Quhapacñan, the Royal Road, feels like walking through a living blueprint. The stones, worn smooth by countless footsteps, still fit together so tightly you can't slide a knife between them. And perhaps that's the most humbling lesson of all, that an empire without wheels, without writing, could build something so enduring, it outlasted the very conquerors who once marveled at its brilliance. Moving from the organic curves of Inca roads to the razor-straight ambition of Rome, the Via Appia stands as a stark declaration of imperial might. Laid down in 312 BC, this wasn't just a road, it was a statement carved in stone. Picture a pathway so meticulously engineered. Its foundation layers included crushed pottery and volcanic ash, creating a concrete-like base that still supports modern traffic today. The Romans didn't just build roads, they built immortality. What set the Via Appia apart wasn't just its legendary durability, but its psychological impact. While earlier cultures wove roads into sacred landscapes, Rome used them as instruments of control. Stretching over 300 miles from Rome to the port of Brindisi, this Queen of Roads didn't meander to avoid obstacles, it conquered them. Swamps were drained, hills were leveled, and any opposing armies, they'd find legions marching toward them at terrifying speed. The message was clear: resistance was futile. Yet beneath this show of brute efficiency lay surprising sophistication. Those famous straight lines, they weren't perfectly straight. Engineers added subtle inclines, just 1 degree of slope for every 100 feet to channel rainwater into drainage ditches. At night, moonlight would glint off these shallow grooves, turning the road into a glowing ribbon across the countryside. Even the stones themselves were strategic. Locally sourced basalt for the rugged south, smoother lava blocks near Rome where chariots needed speed. The road's political genius reveals itself in the details. Milestones marked every Roman mile, about 4,850 modern feet, each inscribed with the distance to the capital. Imagine being a conquered people, constantly reminded how far you stood from the heart of the empire. Rest houses appeared precisely every 15 miles, a day's march for soldiers, while way stations doubled as surveillance posts. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was a nervous system pulsing with information and troops at the emperor's command. Today, walking the surviving stretches of the Via Appia feels like tracing the veins of history. You can still see ruts worn by chariot wheels 2,000 years ago, or touch stones polished smooth by countless sandals. But perhaps its most enduring lesson is how Rome turned something as mundane as a road into a tool of transformation, reshaping landscapes, economies, and even identities. Where the Incas built to harmonize, Rome built to dominate. And in that contrast, we see the full spectrum of what roads meant to the ancient world. Not just paths to travel, but mirrors of the cultures that made them. While Rome's Via Appia projected imperial dominance, the Persian royal road achieved something even more revolutionary. It shrank an empire. Picture a highway stretching 1,500 miles from the Aegean Sea to the heart of modern-day Iran, a route so efficient that royal couriers could traverse its entire length in just 7 days. That's 200 miles a day on horseback, a speed unmatched until the invention of the steam locomotive. The secret wasn't just endurance, it was geometry. Unlike the rigid straightness of Roman roads, the royal road embraced subtle, calculated curves, its gentle slopes designed to minimize fatigue for both riders and animals over vast distances. What truly set this ancient superhighway apart was its precision. Archaeologists have found sections where the width remains consistent to within inches across hundreds of miles, evidence of centralized planning that would impress modern engineers. But the Persians didn't just rely on human ingenuity, they harnessed nature itself. Along desert stretches, the road's alignment caught prevailing trade winds, creating natural cooling for travelers. In mountainous regions, it traced valleys where seasonal winds swept away snow, keeping passages open year-round. This wasn't just road building, it was an early form of environmental engineering. The road's rest stops, or chapar-khane, reveal another layer of sophistication. Spaced precisely 1 day's ride apart, these stations weren't mere inns, they functioned like ancient data centers. Fresh horses stood ready at each stop, while scribes recorded messages in a relay system that foreshadowed modern packet-switched networks. Herodotus marveled at this system, writing that neither snow nor rain nor darkness could halt these couriers. Sound familiar? It's no coincidence the U.S. Postal Service later borrowed that motto. Beneath the logistical brilliance lay cultural alchemy. The road didn't just move people and goods, it blended languages, religions, and ideas. A single silver darak coin could buy bread in Sardis or silk in Susa, thanks to standardized currency introduced along the route. Zoroastrian fire temples, Jewish synagogues, and Greek trading posts sprung up side by side, creating the world's first multicultural corridor. Modern historians argue the Royal Road did more than sustain an empire. It invented the concept of globalization 2,500 years early. Today, fragments of packed limestone and clay still trace the Royal Road's path through the Zagros Mountains. If you listen closely, the wind might carry echoes of galloping hooves and jingling harnesses, ghosts of a system that proved infrastructure isn't just about stone and dirt. It's about shrinking worlds, connecting minds, and proving that even without satellites or silicon chips, ancient engineers could weave continents together with nothing more than dirt, determination, and dazzling foresight. Beneath the scorching Egyptian sun, an even more astonishing network of roads lies, hidden roads that didn't just connect cities, but literally built them. The pyramid causeways of Giza weren't mere paths, they were the lifelines of construction, designed to move limestone blocks weighing as much as 60 tons each. That's the equivalent of hauling 10 elephants without wheels, without pulleys, using nothing but raw ingenuity and precision engineering. Recent laser scans have uncovered grooves carved into these ancient roadways, running parallel like invisible train tracks. Archaeologists now believe these were guide channels for wooden sledges, kept slick with water or oil to reduce friction. Imagine teams of workers chanting in rhythm, dragging colossal stones along these lubricated tracks, their progress measured in inches per hour. But the real stroke of genius, the road's slight inclines. Instead of fighting gravity, builders used it to their advantage, allowing the weight of the stones to assist in their own transport, a principle modern engineers still employ in conveyor systems. Yet these roads were more than just construction tools. Their angles weren't arbitrary, they mirrored celestial pathways sacred to the Egyptians. The causeway leading to the Great Pyramid aligns with the constellation Orion's belt during the summer solstice, turning the entire structure into a terrestrial echo of the heavens. Even the ramps were temporary monuments built from the same limestone as the pyramids themselves, then dismantled and repurposed, leaving no trace of their existence until modern technology revealed their secrets. What's most remarkable is how these roads reflect the Egyptian worldview. Unlike the straight military precision of Roman roads or the organic curves of Inca pathways, pyramid causeways were ceremonial as much as functional. Processions of priests bearing offerings would walk these same routes that construction crews used, blurring the line between sacred ritual and practical labor. Every stone placed, every groove carved was an act of devotion, a prayer in physical form. Today, standing on the remnants of these roads, you can still see faint traces of the grooves, worn smooth by countless tons of stone and generations of labor. They whisper of a civilization that saw no divide between engineering and spirituality, where every measurement held cosmic significance. When we look at the pyramids, we marvel at their grandeur, but perhaps the true miracle lies beneath our feet, in the roads that made the impossible possible. Long before silk and spices flowed between east and west, the bones of the Silk Road already crisscrossed Asia, not as a unified trade route, but as scattered fragments of survival. These earliest paths didn't connect empires. They followed the desperate footsteps of nomadic herders chasing grasslands that vanished with the seasons. Imagine walking across the Taklamakan Desert, where shifting dunes swallowed landmarks whole, and the only constants were the stars overhead. That's how these proto-routes were born, not from commerce, but from the primal need to outrun starvation. What's astonishing is how these early travelers hacked nature's code. During excavations near the Tian Shan Mountains, archaeologists uncovered stone cairns spaced at precise intervals, some aligned to catch the first light of dawn, others positioned to cast shadows pointing toward hidden springs. These weren't random markers, they formed a celestial compass with angles calibrated to bypass deadly sandstorms. In the western go-by, sections of the path suddenly veer at 34-degree angles, mirroring wind patterns that still sweep the region every April. The message is clear: these weren't just trails, they were lifelines etched into the earth by generations who learned to read the land like a living map. The real breakthrough came when researchers noticed something peculiar about these cairns. Certain stones bore faint carvings, not words, but constellations. A cluster of dots here mirrored the summer triangle, a jagged line there traced Orion's belt. This was the world's first terrestrial GPS, using the night sky as its operating system. Nomads could navigate hundreds of miles without written directions, simply by aligning stones with stars, and the system was shockingly precise. Some markers still guide modern shepherds during satellite outages, proving ancient knowledge sometimes outsmarts technology. But the true genius of these paths lies in their adaptability. Unlike Roman roads that imposed straight lines on landscapes, these routes danced with nature. Winter trails snaked along sheltered valleys, while summer versions climbed to catch mountain breezes. At Dunhuang, where 4 routes converged, archaeologists found layers of compacted gravel, each stratum a different era's solution to sinking sands. The deeper they dug, the more they realized the Silk Road didn't invent trade routes. It inherited a network refined over millennia, built by people who understood that survival meant bending like the reeds in the wind. Today, standing on one of these abandoned segments feels like hearing a whispered secret. The stones still warm underfoot as they did for Bronze Age herders, and the same stars still gleam overhead. Maybe that's the ultimate lesson of these forgotten paths, that the greatest journeys begin not with grand ambitions, but with the simple act of taking one careful step after another, eyes fixed on the heavens, trusting the earth to show the way. High above the Nazca Desert, what looks like random scratches in the earth transforms into something extraordinary, a vast network of lines so precise they could have been drawn with a ruler. Some stretch straight as arrows for over 30 miles across the barren landscape, their edges sharp enough to cast shadows at noon. But here's what's truly baffling: these aren't just random marks. Many align with the summer solstice sunrise, while others point directly to hidden veins of underground water. How did a culture without aerial views or modern tools achieve such staggering accuracy? And why? Theories abound. Some researchers argue these were sacred pathways, walked during rituals where the act of following the line's angles became a form of prayer. Others suggest they functioned like a giant astronomical calendar, tracking celestial events critical to agriculture in this parched land. But the most compelling clue lies beneath the surface. Recent satellite imaging revealed something astonishing. Where the lines converge, underground aquifers often bubble close to the surface. It's as if the Nazca people mapped an invisible water grid across the desert, turning these pathways into a survival manual etched into the earth. What's often overlooked is the engineering behind these geoglyphs. The lines weren't simply scraped into the ground, they were meticulously crafted. Workers removed the dark, sun-baked top layer to expose the lighter substrate beneath, creating contrast visible from space. But here's the kicker: the trenches are shallow, barely 4 to 6 inches deep. Yet despite centuries of wind and erosion, they've barely faded. That's because the Nazca understood their environment intimately. The desert's unique microclimate, where morning mist settled just enough to harden the exposed soil, acted as a natural preservative. This wasn't just art, it was environmental engineering perfected over generations. Then there's the mystery of perspective. From ground level, the lines appear as indistinct grooves, but climb even a small hill, and their geometric perfection snaps into focus. How did the creators visualize designs they could never fully see? Some scholars point to simple tools, wooden stakes and ropes, while others propose the Nazca might have used early hot air balloons, though no evidence confirms this. The truth may be simpler yet more profound. These people thought in scales and angles modern minds struggle to grasp, blending practical knowledge with spiritual cosmology. Today, standing beside one of these ancient lines, you can still see the precision firsthand. The edges remain knife-sharp, defying time and the elements. And perhaps that's the real lesson of the Nazca, not that they left behind puzzles for us to solve, but that they mastered a language of earth and sky we're only beginning to decipher. In a world obsessed with speed and noise, their silent desert pathways remind us that some truths aren't shouted. They're whispered across millennia, waiting for those willing to listen. 13,000 years ago, as glaciers still gripped much of North America, the first Americans were carving paths into a virgin continent, not with stone tools but with their very footsteps. These weren't just trails, they were the blueprint of a migration, etched into the earth by the Clovis people as they tracked mammoths and bison across a land untouched by human hands. What's astonishing isn't just their age, but their intelligence. These routes didn't fight the wilderness, they collaborated with it, following the subtle cues of animal trails, wind patterns, and even the growth of certain plants that signaled water nearby. Recent discoveries of fossilized footprints in New Mexico's White Sands National Park reveal something extraordinary. The spacing between these ancient steps suggests groups traveled together, men, women, even children, moving in rhythmic procession. Some tracks show sudden shifts in direction, as if the group collectively changed course to avoid unseen dangers. Archaeologists now believe these routes were more than practical paths. They were living maps passed down through generations like oral history in physical form. The angles of these trails weren't arbitrary either. By studying animal bones found along the same routes, researchers noticed something remarkable. The paths curve at points where prey animals naturally change direction during seasonal migrations. The Clovis weren't just hunters, they were students of animal psychology, predicting movement centuries before wildlife biology existed as a science. But the real revelation came when scientists overlaid these ancient routes with modern topographic maps. The trails consistently avoid the steepest terrain, not by chance but by design, choosing gradients that would allow heavily laden groups to conserve energy. Even more impressive, some segments align with the rising sun during equinoxes, suggesting celestial navigation played a role long before compasses existed. At Utah's Range Creek Canyon, archaeologists found clusters of stone markers along these paths, their placement corresponding with key constellations visible during migration seasons. What's humbling is the scale of cooperation these roads represent. Fossilized mud preserves impressions of multiple foot sizes moving in unison, hinting at communal travel where the young and old paced themselves together. At one site in Texas, a child's footprint appears beside deeper adult prints for miles, a poignant reminder that these journeys weren't solitary affairs, but shared struggles and triumphs. The roads even show evidence of maintenance, branches woven into muddy stretches to create stable walkways, or stones arranged to mark hazardous areas. Standing today where these ancient travelers once walked, it's impossible not to feel their legacy. The same winds that cooled their faces still ripple across the plains, the same stars that guided them still shine. Their roads whisper a truth modern society often forgets, that the best paths aren't those that conquer nature, but those that converse with it, a dialogue of survival written in footprints and fading sunlight, waiting 13 millennia for us to listen. Dripping like golden tears from ancient trees, Baltic amber held a magic all its own, soft enough to carve yet enduring for millennia, catching sunlight in honey-colored depths. This wasn't just a pretty stone. To prehistoric Europe, it was a currency more valuable than gold, sparking trade routes that snaked across the continent long before written history began. The so-called amber roads weren't straight, efficient highways like Rome's later creations. Instead, they meandered like cautious rivers, avoiding treacherous marshes and dense forests with an almost uncanny understanding of the land. Recent discoveries have peeled back layers of mystery surrounding these routes. Archaeologists tracing the paths noticed something peculiar. The roads consistently skirt around areas that modern soil analysis reveals were once waterlogged or unstable. Without compasses or maps, how did Bronze Age traders navigate such hazards? The answer lies in subtle environmental clues still visible today. Certain types of vegetation, like alder trees or reeds, grow predominantly in wetlands. Ancient travelers likely learned to read these natural signposts. their routes becoming a living atlas passed down through generations. But the real stroke of genius emerges in the spacing of rest stops. Chemical analysis of amber artifacts found along these routes shows traces of campfire smoke and organic residues at remarkably regular intervals, roughly every 15 to 20 miles, a day's journey on foot. These weren't random pauses, they were carefully planned way stations, often positioned near natural landmarks like distinctive rock formations or springs. Excavations at one such stop in modern Poland uncovered not just hearths, but standardized weights and measures carved from local stone, suggesting these sites functioned as early trading posts where goods were evaluated and exchanged. What's fascinating is how these roads adapted over time. As trade networks expanded, the routes evolved, wider paths appeared where traffic increased, while lesser-used branches faded. In some places, traders even improved the terrain, laying down woven mats of branches to cross muddy stretches, creating what might be Europe's first paved roads. The amber itself tells part of this story. Pieces found in Mediterranean tombs bear microscopic wear patterns proving they traveled the full route from Baltic forests to Aegean palaces, changing hands dozens of times along the way. Perhaps the most poignant evidence of these roads' importance comes from an unexpected source: human remains. Burial sites near key junctions often contain amber beads, even in regions where the material doesn't occur naturally. These weren't just trade items, they were status symbols, talismans, and perhaps even passports, marking their bearers as part of an interconnected world stretching far beyond their villages. Today, walking a surviving stretch of the Amber Road in Lithuania, you can still find tiny fragments of amber weathering out of the soil, golden echoes of footsteps that vanished thousands of years ago, yet still whisper of a time when the continent first learned to weave itself together through trade and trust. Stretching across Australia's vast deserts and dense bushlands, the Aboriginal songlines trace patterns invisible to the untrained eye, pathways not marked by stone or dirt, but woven into the very fabric of oral tradition. Imagine walking through a landscape where every rock, river, and tree holds a story, where the angles between landmarks map not just physical distances but the footsteps of ancestral beings. These songlines aren't mere navigation tools. They're living encyclopedias, encoding thousands of years of knowledge about water sources, seasonal changes, and celestial events into rhythmic verses passed down through generations. What makes these pathways extraordinary is their precision. Studies of songlines in the Western Desert reveal how their routes align with star clusters, mirroring the movements of the Milky Way during specific seasons. A curve in the path might correspond to the curve of a celestial serpent in the night sky, while a sudden turn could mark where an ancestral creator changed direction during the dream time. Anthropologists have documented cases where elders, guided solely by these oral maps, walked hundreds of miles across unfamiliar terrain without ever straying from the correct route, a feat that left modern navigators stunned. The real genius lies in the system's adaptability. Unlike fixed Roman roads or Inca highways, songlines evolve with the land. When droughts dry up traditional waterholes, new verses are added to redirect travelers to alternative sources. These updates ripple through the oral network, shared during ceremonial gatherings where knowledge is exchanged like currency. Even more remarkable, the same songline can exist across multiple language groups, with each community contributing their own layer of interpretation while maintaining the core narrative. It's a decentralized navigation system that predates the internet by millennia. Recent research has uncovered another layer of sophistication. Certain songlines follow geological fault lines or trace the migratory routes of animals, suggesting ancient observers noticed patterns modern science only recently confirmed. In Arnhem Land, one songline's abrupt 60-degree turn, aligns perfectly with a hidden underground aquifer knowledge that would have been vital for survival in arid regions. Meanwhile, in the Kimberley, star maps embedded in songlines accurately predict the appearance of seasonal constellations used to time harvests. But perhaps the most profound aspect of these pathways is how they blend the practical with the sacred. A rock formation isn't just a landmark, it's the petrified body of an ancestral being. A waterhole isn't merely a resource, it's a living library where each ripple tells part of the story. To follow a songline is to walk a path of memory and meaning, where every step reaffirms connections between people, land, and cosmos. Today, as satellite technology reshapes how we navigate, the songlines endure, not as relics, but as active systems still used by Aboriginal communities. Scientists now collaborate with elders to document this knowledge, discovering that some songlines contain environmental data spanning back to the last ice age. Standing at the crossroads of oral history and astronomy, ecology and spirituality, these ancient pathways challenge us to reconsider what a road truly is. Maybe it doesn't need stones or bridges. Maybe all it requires is a story told just right to guide you home. Beneath the sun-baked hills of Crete, the Minones engineered roads that defy expectations, not with brute straightness, but with graceful curves that whisper of ceremony and spectacle. These weren't just thoroughfares, they were stages for one of history's most daring rituals, bull leaping. Picture a road widening suddenly into a courtyard, its edges subtly banked to create a natural arena. Here, acrobats would somersault over charging bulls, their performances woven into the very fabric of Minone culture. The road's curves weren't accidents, they were choreography in stone, designed to guide both participants and spectators through these sacred dances of agility and bravery. What's even more impressive is how these roads married ritual with practicality. Archaeologists have uncovered sophisticated drainage systems running beneath the flagstones, with carefully sloped channels that kept pathways dry even during torrential rains. At Knossos, one section of road features a hidden reservoir that collected runoff, filtering it through layers of porous stone before redirecting it to nearby fields. This wasn't just clever engineering. It was ecological foresight, turning roads into water management systems centuries before the concept existed elsewhere. But the real mystery lies beneath the surface, literally. During recent excavations, researchers lifting weathered paving stones discovered something astonishing: cryptic symbols carved into the bedrock below. Some resemble bulls or double axes, while others show spirals that mirror patterns found in Minone frescoes. The most intriguing cluster appears at crossroads, suggesting these weren't mere decorations but functional markers, perhaps the world's first road signs. One recurring symbol, a branching line resembling a modern Y, consistently appears where paths diverge, possibly indicating direction or distance to key sites like ports or granaries. The materials themselves tell another story. Unlike Roman roads built to last millennia, Minone pathways used locally sourced limestone mixed with crushed seashells, a blend that created slight springiness underfoot, ideal for the dynamic movements of bull leaping. In coastal areas, the roads incorporate volcanic stone imported from distant islands, hinting at a trade network sophisticated enough to prioritize specialized materials for different sections. Standing on these ancient roads today, you can still sense their dual purpose. The same stones that supported bustling trade caravans by day, transformed into sacred spaces by night, illuminated by torches during ceremonies. At Phaistos, the road's gentle ascent toward the palace aligns with the summer solstice sunrise, turning the entire pathway into a celestial runway once a year. This seamless fusion of function and spirituality captures the essence of Minone brilliance, where every curve, every symbol, every carefully chosen stone served both the body and the soul. Perhaps that's the most enduring lesson of these Cretan roads. They remind us that infrastructure isn't just about getting from place to place, it's about how we move through life, blending necessity with meaning, engineering with artistry. The Minones didn't just build roads, they composed symphonies in stone, where even the whisper of sandals against ancient pavement might have carried the echo of a forgotten chant, or the thunderous applause for a daring leap over horns and history. Winding through China's mist-shrouded valleys, the spirit roads of ancient emperors were far more than grand avenues. They were cosmic bridges between worlds. Designed using Feng Shui principles so precise they're still studied today, these pathways didn't just lead to tombs, they charted a course for souls. Picture a road flanked by towering stone guardians, lions, elephants, even mythical Kilin, each statue positioned not just for grandeur, but to deflect malevolent energies with mathematical precision. The angles of these roads weren't arbitrary. Satellite imaging reveals how many align perfectly with distant mountain peaks, transforming natural formations into symbolic gates for the afterlife. What's fascinating is the engineering behind this spiritual geometry. The roads often slope upward at exactly 3 degrees, a gradient barely perceptible to walkers. But Feng Shui masters believed this gentle ascent helped lift the emperor's spirit toward heaven. At the Ming Dynasty tombs near Beijing, the central axis of the spirit road runs straight as an arrow for over 4 miles, but laser scans show it's not perfectly level. Instead, it dips slightly at intervals corresponding to the lunar calendar, as if the pavement itself pulsed with celestial rhythms. The statues lining these paths tell another layer of the story. Archaeologists once assumed they were mere decorations until noticing their placements followed strict patterns. Civil officials stand on the left, military officers on the right, a mirror of imperial court protocol. Even their heights were calibrated. The farther one walked toward the tomb, the taller the statues became, creating a visual crescendo that subtly prepared visitors for the sacred space ahead. Some figures hold objects at precise angles that, when measured, correspond to constellations visible during the emperor's birth month. Recent drone surveys uncovered an even more astonishing detail. Where these spirit roads intersect with natural waterways, engineers often built bridges with archways precisely wide enough to frame specific mountain peaks when viewed from certain vantage points. These dragon gates weren't just architectural flourishes, they channeled Kai energy according to Feng Shui calculations so complex, modern physicists have modeled their acoustics and found they amplify specific sound frequencies during seasonal winds. Perhaps the most poignant feature lies beneath the surface. Ground-penetrating radar at the Kaienling Mausoleum revealed that the road's foundation stones were laid in concentric circles, radiating outward, a design traditionally used in temples to represent the harmony of heaven and earth. For the ancients, every step along these roads was a meditation, every angle a prayer. Today, walking the same paths, you can still feel that intention in the way morning mist pools between the statues, or how sunset light slides along the pavement like a golden river, carrying whispers of an empire that built roads not just for the living but for eternity. In the frozen expanse of Greenland, where glaciers carved the land like slow-moving titans, the Vikings left behind roads unlike any others, paths not of stone or dirt, but of carefully packed snow and ice. These weren't just trails, they were engineered highways designed to conquer a landscape that would seem impassable to most. Imagine sleds laden with supplies gliding along these frozen ribbons, their runners following zigzag patterns that look almost playful at first glance. But there was nothing accidental about these curves. Each turn was a calculated defense against gravity's pull, preventing heavy loads from careening down icy slopes. What's remarkable is how these roads reveal the Vikings' intimate understanding of their environment. Recent excavations uncovered patches of moss deliberately placed at intervals along the routes, not random clumps but living markers. Scientists analyzing these growths made a startling discovery. The moss clusters correspond precisely to areas where winter winds scour the snow thin, exposing dangerous crevices or unstable ice. These weren't just road signs, they were natural hazard warnings maintained across generations. Some moss patches even show signs of being tended, suggesting Vikings may have cultivated these indicators like invisible guardrails. The road's construction techniques defy expectations. Instead of flattening paths straight across the terrain, builders intentionally created slight banks along the edges, forming shallow troughs that channeled sleds along safe trajectories. In steep areas, they packed snow in alternating diagonal layers, creating a texture that provided traction, an ancient version of modern anti-skid pavement. Archaeologists experimenting with reconstructions found these methods reduced sled accidents by nearly 70% compared to unmodified ice. But the real genius lies in the route's adaptability. As climate shifts altered ice conditions over centuries, the Vikings adjusted their highways accordingly. Core samples from one site reveal at least 12 distinct layers of packed snow, each from a different era, with slight variations in alignment tracking changes in glacial movement. Some paths even fork abruptly where the community clearly debated the safest way forward, leaving behind what might be history's first frozen traffic debates. Perhaps most poignant are the personal touches frozen in time. At one crossroads, researchers found a child's mitten preserved in ice near a moss marker, its stitching still visible. Nearby, grooves in the ice suggest where someone paused to adjust a load. Their footprints long vanished, but their momentary struggles still etched into the road's memory. These weren't just functional routes, they were lifelines, carrying food, trade goods, and families through some of Earth's harshest conditions. Today, climate change is revealing these highways anew as Greenland's ice retreats. What emerges isn't just a network of paths, but a testament to resilience. The Vikings didn't conquer the ice, they conversed with it, learning its language and rhythms until even the most unforgiving landscape became a road home. Standing where these frozen highways once gleamed under Arctic skies, you can almost hear the creak of sled runners and the crunch of boots, a vanished world that still has lessons to teach about ingenuity etched in ice. Rising like ghostly ribbons above the jungles of the Yucatan, the Mayan Sacbys roads glow almost unnaturally white under the tropical sun. These weren't just pathways, they were elevated causeways, some reaching heights of 6 feet, built from crushed limestone mixed with sap from the chukum tree, a natural binding agent that made the surfaces nearly waterproof. Picture walking on a road that's remained smooth and intact for over 1,000 years, while the jungle around it swallows modern asphalt in decades. That's the enduring magic of Mayan engineering, but the real marvel isn't just their durability, it's their hidden hydrology. While most ancient roads avoided water, the Sacbys embraced it. Their gentle slopes channeled rainfall into cisterns or sacred cenotes, those deep sinkholes the Maya considered portals to the underworld. Archaeologists mapping these routes noticed something peculiar. Where roads intersect, the angles often point directly to hidden water sources. At Khmer, a major Sacby curves abruptly at 72 degrees, a detour that seemed inefficient until LiDAR revealed it aligns perfectly with an underground river system. The Maya weren't just building roads, they were crafting a water distribution network disguised as highways. Then there's the celestial puzzle. Several Sacbys stretch arrows straight for miles, their orientations matching key astronomical events. The road from Chelum to Khmer, for instance, aligns with the rising sun during the spring equinox, illuminating the entire causeway like a fiery runway. At Dizibelchalton, a Sacby points directly to the temple doorway where, on the equinox, sunlight pierces the structure like a laser, a phenomenon still visible today. But the most tantalizing clue comes from Uxmal, where a rare bend in the road creates a perfect sightline to Venus's southernmost position in the night sky. For a civilization obsessed with tracking Venus's cycles, this wasn't coincidence, it was celestial cartography in limestone. What's often overlooked is the soundscape of these roads. Recent acoustic studies show the compacted limestone surface produces a distinct reverberation when walked upon, a low, resonant tone that may have been intentional. In Mayan cosmology, certain sounds were believed to summon rain or communicate with spirits. Could these roads have been massive musical instruments, their tones echoing through the jungle during processions? At Edsna, experiments proved footsteps on the Sacby that generate harmonic frequencies matching the pitch of ritual whistles found nearby. Today, walking a surviving Sacby feels like traversing a living algorithm. The same stones that guided merchants carrying jade and cocoa also witnessed priests robed in Quetzal feathers, their footsteps timed to celestial rhythms. Spider monkeys still leap across these white roads as their ancestors did, and in the stillness you can almost hear the whisper of a civilization that didn't just move through the world. They conversed with it, turning every journey into a dialogue between earth, water, and sky. The Sacbyob remind us that the most profound roads aren't those that conquer distance, but those that weave meaning into every mile. Stretching like a living artery across the Indian subcontinent, the Grand Trunk Road remains one of history's most astonishing feats of pre-modern engineering. Built over 2,500 years ago, this ancient highway didn't just connect cities, it wove together empires, cultures, and spiritual traditions into a single, unbroken thread. What's incredible isn't just its scale, but its thoughtful design. Unlike Roman roads that prioritized military speed, or Inca trails that followed mountain contours, this road was crafted for the rhythm of elephant, its gentle slopes and wide curves accommodating the deliberate, swaying gait of these colossal travelers. Archaeologists studying surviving sections have uncovered subtle genius in every detail. The road's surface wasn't just packed dirt, it was layered like a cake gravel at the base for drainage, topped with crushed stone, and finished with a smooth mixture of clay and lime that hardened like concrete under monsoon rains. But the real stroke of foresight, the shade trees, planted at precise intervals calculated to match a day's march, their branches formed a living canopy that offered respite from the blistering sun. Accounts from Greek ambassador Megasthenes describe how travelers could walk for weeks beneath this leafy tunnel, their path marked not by milestones, but by the scent of neem and banyan leaves rustling overhead. What's often overlooked is how the road doubled as a spiritual compass. Inscriptions found along its length reveal it wasn't just a trade route, it was a pilgrimage highway with intentional detours leading to sacred rivers and temples. At Sarnath, where Buddha gave his first sermon, the road widened suddenly into a ceremonial plaza, its stones worn smooth by centuries of barefoot devotees. Further west, near Taxila, the angle of the road shifts to align with the summer solstice sunrise, illuminating a series of stupas like a celestial spotlight. This duality, practical and sacred, reflects a culture that saw no divide between commerce and devotion, where merchants and monks might walk side by side, their journeys interwoven like the road itself. Recent excavations have revealed another layer of sophistication, hidden way stations. These weren't just rest stops but early toll booths and cultural hubs, where officials collected taxes in standardized weights and travelers exchanged news from distant regions. At one such site in Punjab, archaeologists found a trove of coins from as far away as Rome and Persia, alongside clay tablets inscribed in multiple scripts, proof this road was the internet of its age, transmitting goods, ideas, and faith across continents. Perhaps the most poignant legacy lies in the road's endurance. In Bangladesh, villagers still follow a raised earthen path that local law says was tread by Ashoka's elephants. The trees planted millennia ago now tower over modern highways, their roots cradling fragments of ancient brick. To walk these surviving stretches is to feel the echo of countless footsteps, soldiers and silk traders, pilgrims and poets, all drawn together by a road that didn't just cross land but transcended time. In an era of fleeting digital connections, the Grand Trunk Road reminds us that true pathways aren't just about distance. They're about continuity, a conversation between generations written not in words, but in stone and soil and the shade of enduring trees. Centuries before covered wagons carved their way westward, another road stretched across the American continent, one forged not by pioneers, but by generations of indigenous travelers who understood the land in ways settlers never could. The Oregon Trail we know from history books was merely following a path laid down thousands of years earlier, its route shaped by the wisdom of tribes who navigated not with maps, but with intimate knowledge of rivers, stars, and seasonal rhythms. What's remarkable about this ancient highway isn't just its age, but its adaptability. Unlike the rigid, straight-line trails later settlers would impose on the landscape, this earlier route danced with the seasons. Summer paths traced the high ground where breezes kept travelers cool and grasshoppers signaled water sources, while winter versions dipped into sheltered valleys where geothermal springs bubbled beneath the snow. Archaeologists have uncovered sections where the road's angle shifts precisely at the point where prevailing winds change direction in autumn, a subtle adjustment that would have spared travelers from walking headfirst into biting storms. Then there are the cairns, these carefully stacked stone towers, once dismissed as random landmarks, now reveal astonishing precision. Spaced at intervals matching a day's walk, many contain hidden quartz crystals that catch the light at sunrise and sunset, functioning as natural guideposts. Some cairns align with specific constellations when viewed from certain vantage points. At Wyoming's South Pass, a cluster of these markers forms an arrow pointing directly to a hidden canyon where edible roots grow thickest in spring. The Umatilla people still recount stories of grandmothers teaching children to read the stones, turning these piles into living navigation manuals. Recent LiDAR surveys have exposed even more sophistication. Beneath the well-known ruts of pioneer wagons, researchers detected older grooves wider and shallower, matching the travois poles used by indigenous peoples to transport goods. These parallel tracks often branch at precise 30-degree angles, leading to seasonal campsites or sacred sites. At one junction in eastern Oregon, archaeologists found boulders positioned to amplify echoes across valleys, an early auditory signaling system that may have allowed distant groups to communicate without smoke or runners. Perhaps most poignant are the traces left not in stone but in living memory. Oral histories from the Nez Perce describe resting places where certain flowers were planted to mark safe camping spots, their blooms timed to coincide with seasonal migrations. In Idaho's White Prairie, the same commerce lilies that guided ancestors still push through the earth each spring, their purple heads tracing a forgotten road map across the land. Walking these ancient segments today, you can still feel the difference between the two eras. Where pioneer wagons gouged deep scars fighting the landscape, the older path flows like water around obstacles, its gentle curves whispering of travelers who moved with the land rather than against it. The real Oregon Trail wasn't conquered, it was inherited, its wisdom written in river bends and stone piles long before the first iron-shod wheel ever rolled westward. Beneath the scorching Saharan sun, the Carthaginians engineered roads that defied the desert itself, ribbons of compacted earth and crushed stone, winding between towering dunes with almost supernatural precision. These weren't just trade routes, they were masterclasses in survival, where every curve and well placement held life or death significance. Imagine guiding camel caravans through a sea of sand where landmarks vanished overnight, relying on roads angled just so to avoid the deadliest ergs, shifting dune fields that could swallow entire expeditions whole. The Carthaginians didn't fight the desert, they decoded its secrets, turning what should have been a wasteland into the Mediterranean's wealthiest highway. What's astonishing is how these roads reveal an understanding of desert physics lost to later civilizations. Modern satellite imagery shows their paths consistently skirt the leeward sides of bedrock outcrops, positions where wind patterns naturally clear sand. At certain points, the roads make abrupt 15-degree turns, aligning perfectly with underground limestone ridges that provided stable footing beneath the shifting sands. Archaeologists excavating these bends often find remnants of wooden posts, suggesting they once supported markers visible during sandstorms, but the real stroke of genius lies in the wells. Spaced precisely every 20 Roman miles, about 18 modern miles, each was dug to intersect with hidden aquifers mapped through generations of trial and error. Chemical analysis of the water shows some wells tapped mineral-rich veins intentionally, a natural electrolyte boost for dehydrated travelers. The treasure troves found along these routes tell another story. Hordes of Carthaginian coins, often buried near way stations, weren't just lost wealth, they were part of a sophisticated toll system. Merchants paid fees based on the width of their camel trains, with wider loads requiring more coins. At the ruined outpost of Gadames, archaeologists uncovered stone tablets recording tolls in multiple languages, including early Tifinagh script used by Tuareg guides. These bilingual records hint at a multicultural network where Carthaginian engineers collaborated with Berber nomads, combining maritime trade knowledge with desert survival skills. Recent excavations have revealed even more clever adaptations. Sections of road near modern-day Toza incorporate fragments of pottery mixed into the surface, a technique that reduced glare during the day and radiated residual heat at night, creating cooler travel conditions. Elsewhere, the roads slope imperceptibly toward natural catch basins where rare rains could be harvested. Perhaps most impressive are the silent sentinels, cairns built with alternating light and dark stones that, when viewed from a distance, formed high-contrast lines visible even in heat haze. Walking these ancient trade routes today, you can still find traces of their brilliance, fragments of amphorae that once carried water or wine, or the occasional coin fused to the earth by centuries of sun. But the real legacy isn't in the artifacts. It's in the enduring proof that even the harshest landscapes can be navigated with observation, adaptation, and respect. The Carthaginians didn't conquer the Sahara, they listened to it, and in that dialogue built roads that turned shifting sands into streams of gold. Winding through the olive groves and rugged hills of ancient Greece, the sacred ways were far more than simple paths to holy sites. They were carefully choreographed experiences designed to elevate pilgrims both physically and spiritually. Take the road to Delphi, where every twist in the path revealed the temple of Apollo piece by piece, its gleaming columns appearing suddenly between cliffs like a divine vision. Modern researchers using laser scans have made a stunning discovery. These curves weren't just aesthetic choices. They follow precise mathematical ratios, with each turn calculated to frame the temple at specific angles that aligned with solar events. During the summer solstice, the final bend in the road would position the rising sun directly behind the temple's eastern facade, bathing the entire sanctuary in golden light as pilgrims arrived. What's even more fascinating is how these roads engaged all the senses. Archaeocaustic studies at the sanctuary of Eleusis revealed that the Sacred Way's stone surface was engineered to amplify specific sound frequencies. The paving stones laid atop a carefully graded bed of crushed ceramic and seashells created a natural resonance chamber. When hundreds of initiates chanted hymns during the Eleusinian mysteries, their voices would harmonize with the road itself, the vibrations traveling up through the soles of their feet. Some scholars believe this wasn't just an accident of construction. The road may have functioned as a massive ritual instrument, its acoustic properties enhancing the mystical experience. The materials tell another story. Unlike Roman roads built for durability, sections of the Sacred Ways incorporated porous limestone that absorbed olive oil and perfumes. During major festivals, priests would anoint the stones, releasing fragrant clouds as barefoot worshippers passed a multisensory preparation for encountering the divine. At Epidaurus, the road to the healing sanctuary of Asclepius featured alternating light and dark stones arranged in wave-like patterns. Recent eye-tracking studies suggest these visual rhythms had a hypnotic effect, slowing pilgrims' heart rates and putting them in a meditative state before receiving oracles or treatments. Perhaps the most poignant evidence of these roads' sacred purpose comes from the traces left by pilgrims themselves. Along the Delphi route, archaeologists have found thousands of small depressions worn into bedrock, not from erosion, but from generations of travelers pausing to kneel at the same spots where the mountain vista first revealed the sacred site. The roads even preserved moments of personal devotion. At one turn near Thebes, someone carved a tiny pair of wings into the guardstone, a humble offering to Hermes, protector of travelers. Walking these paths today, you can still feel their transformative power. The same stones that once guided ancient seekers now catch the afternoon light in familiar patterns, and if you listen closely, the wind through the cypress trees might carry echoes of long-again chants. These sacred ways remind us that the journey matters as much as the destination, that sometimes the road itself becomes the prayer. Long before European settlers drew their first maps, Native American trail systems crisscrossed the continent like an ancient internet, threads of knowledge connecting communities from the evergreen forests of Maine to the sweltering swamps of Florida. The Great Warrior Path alone stretched nearly 800 miles, its route tracing the spine of the Appalachian Mountains with uncanny precision. These weren't just random footpaths worn by wandering hunters. They were carefully engineered highways, their angles and placements revealing generations of accumulated wisdom about the land. Take the practice of ridgeline travel. While modern roads often plunge through valleys for efficiency, indigenous trails consistently hugged higher elevations. At first glance, this seems counterintuitive. Climbing requires more energy after all. But walk these ancient routes yourself, and their brilliance becomes clear. Ridgelines offer panoramic visibility, allowing travelers to spot game, enemies, or weather changes from miles away. They're also naturally drier, avoiding the flooded lowlands that could trap unwary settlers. In the Great Smoky Mountains, sections of these trails still follow the exact contours where morning sun first burns off fog, creating ideal travel conditions. The trail's narrow widths tell another story. Where European roads later sprawled wide enough for wagons, indigenous paths often measured barely 18 inches across, just wide enough for single-file movement. This wasn't due to lack of engineering skill. Archaeologists studying game migration patterns made a startling discovery. Many trails pinch suddenly at strategic points, funneling deer and elk into natural bottlenecks where hunters could anticipate their path. In Pennsylvania's Allegheny National Forest, one such narrowing corresponds perfectly with a seasonal deer crossing used for over 3,000 years. The trail itself became a hunting tool, its subtle curves herding prey as effectively as any fence. What's even more impressive is how these routes adapted to different terrains. In the dense hardwood forests of the Northeast, trails often zigzagged between specific tree species, beech trees whose smooth bark made perfect message boards, or walnut groves that provided food and dye along the way. Out west, desert trails followed barely perceptible rises in the landscape where runoff water briefly pooled after rains. Recent LiDAR surveys in Colorado revealed how ancestral Puebloan trails incorporated shadow patterns traveling east in morning light to stay cool, then switching to west-facing slopes in the afternoon. Perhaps the most poignant evidence of these trails' sophistication comes from their endurance. At Saugus Iron Works in Massachusetts, colonial records complain how indigenous guides insisted on detours that seemed illogical until winter floods proved their original path uncrossable. Today, modern highway engineers are rediscovering this wisdom. In West Virginia, a new bike trail purposely follows an ancient Shawnee route because its gentle grades and drainage patterns still outperform computer-designed alternatives. Walking these paths now, you can still find traces of their original purpose: notched trees marking turns, stone cairns aligned with solstice sunrises, or patches of certain medicinal plants that only grow near old camping spots. These trails weren't just about getting from place to place. They were living libraries of ecological knowledge, written not in books but in the very shape of the land. Every curve, every narrowing, every deliberate climb to a vantage point whispers the same truth. That mobility isn't just about distance covered, but about moving through the world with intention and understanding. Beneath the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, a network of roads emerged that would revolutionize urban life, not with stone or gravel, but with a material so durable it still baffles engineers today. The bitumen-paved streets of cities like and Babylon weren't just pathways. They were hydraulic masterpieces designed to defy the very floods that shaped civilization along the Tigris and Euphrates. Picture walking on a surface as dark as night, its sticky, tar-like substance baking rock hard under the relentless sun, yet flexible enough to withstand the annual deluges that could wipe lesser roads from the earth. This wasn't just early engineering, it was alchemy, turning the region's natural asphalt deposits into urban lifelines. What set these roads apart was their brilliant water management. Unlike later Roman roads that shed rainwater, Mesopotamian streets embraced the floods, their subtle angles directing torrents away from city centers and into intricate canal systems. Archaeologists excavating Processional Way discovered grooves carved into the bitumen at precise 5-degree inclines, enough slope to channel water efficiently without eroding the surface. Even more impressive, the road's camber. These streets weren't flat, they arched slightly in the center like a turtle's shell, allowing water to drain sideways into gutters that fed date palm orchards. Every drop was accounted for, every angle calculated to balance drainage with water conservation. The real window into this system comes from thousands of cuneiform tablets detailing road maintenance, the world's first bureaucracy in action. One tablet from Lhasa records a crew repairing 32 cubits of roadway after the spring floods, noting specific bitumen mixtures used for different sections. Another from Nippur lists wages paid to workers who monitored road conditions daily, their inspections timed to lunar cycles when tides affected groundwater levels. These weren't casual repairs, they followed strict protocols with different bitumen grades assigned by traffic volume: thicker, rougher mixes for donkey caravans near city gates, smoother blends for ceremonial avenues where processions passed. Recent chemical analysis reveals another layer of sophistication. The bitumen wasn't used raw, it was mixed with crushed ceramics and palm fiber to create an early form of composite material. In Babylon's Ishtar Gate district, samples show traces of aromatic resins added to the mix, perhaps to mask odors during summer heat. Some sections even incorporated powdered lapis lazuli, turning entire stretches of road into shimmering blue pathways fit for gods and kings. But perhaps the most telling detail lies in the road's longevity. At Tel El Mukayya, a section of bitumen pavement still bears the ruts of chariot wheels after 4,000 years, its surface barely weathered. Modern engineers trying to replicate the formula found it outperforms many contemporary asphalt blends in durability tests. These roads weren't just functional, they were statements of civic pride, their gleaming darkness a stark contrast to the pale desert, visible from miles away like arteries pumping life through the world's first cities. Today, running a hand along one of these ancient surfaces, you can still feel the fingerprints of long-dead builders in the textured bitumen, still sense the urgency behind their work. Each carefully calculated angle, each painstaking repair recorded on clay tablets speaks of a civilization that understood a fundamental truth. Roads aren't just about connection, they're about survival, about bending nature's chaos into order, one perfect degree of slope at a time. Winding through Japan's misty mountains and tranquil valleys, the ancient michi roads were far more than mere pathways. They were living expressions of Shinto philosophy, where every curve honored the land's natural spirit. Unlike the rigid grids of modern cities, these sacred routes meandered like cherry blossoms drifting on a stream, their gentle arcs following the contours of hills and rivers with deliberate grace. To walk a michi was to participate in a centuries-old dialogue between humanity and nature, where the journey itself became a form of worship. The cherry trees lining these roads weren't just decorative, they were spiritual waypoints, their blooming cycles synchronized with shrine festivals. In Nara, the approach to Kasuga still traces a path laid down over 1,200 years ago, its stone markers carved with waka poetry that transforms the act of walking into a literary pilgrimage. One weathered stele near Kyoto bears an inscription that reads, "Step lightly here, for the earth dreams beneath you," a reminder that every footfall resonated in both the physical and spiritual realms. What's remarkable is how these roads' engineering reflected Shinto principles. Instead of leveling hills, builders carved steps into bedrock at precise intervals matching the average human stride. At Ai's Grand Shrine, the michi's subtle incline slows pilgrims' pace naturally, preparing them for the sacred space ahead. Recent studies of the original stone pavers reveal another secret. Their porous texture channels rainwater into tiny grooves that feed moss gardens along the edges, blending function with an aesthetic philosophy called Via Appia, the beauty of impermanence. The markers themselves are marvels of cultural preservation. Some bear notches aligned with solstice sunrises, while others feature faint carvings of foxes or dragons that only become visible when wet with morning dew. In Kumamoto, a set of 18th century markers uses optical illusions. Their carved characters appear distorted unless viewed from a specific angle, ensuring travelers pause to read them at the correct vantage point. These weren't just directions, they were interactive art pieces engaging body, mind, and spirit. Today, walking these roads feels like stepping into a timeless ritual. The same cherry petals that once drifted onto noble processions now catch in the hair of modern hikers, and the stones still hum with the echoes of countless sandals. Perhaps that's the true genius of the michi. They teach us that a road isn't just about reaching a destination, but about how the journey changes us, one mindful step at a time. Snaking through Ethiopia's rugged highlands, the ancient trade routes that carried frankincense and myrrh were feats of engineering as delicate as the precious resins they transported. Unlike the straight, aggressive roads of empires, these paths danced up mountainsides in graceful switchbacks, their angles calculated not for speed but for endurance. Picture camel caravans ascending slopes so steep their loads of fragrant resin would shift dangerously until the road curved just enough to redistribute the weight, a life-saving nuance born from generations of trial and error. The genius of these routes lies in their rhythm. Where modern roads might blast through obstacles, Ethiopian builders worked with the land's natural cadence. Each switchback's turn radius matched the turning circle of a fully laden camel, allowing caravans to pivot without unstrapping their precious cargo. Recent laser scans of the terrain reveal something astonishing. The road's inclines never exceed 10 degrees, a gradient that kept camels from exhausting themselves on month-long journeys. Even more impressive, the turns align with natural wind corridors, creating cooling drafts that offered respite from the baking sun, an early form of climate control carved into the landscape. Evidence of roadside inns, or katamas, adds another layer to this story. These weren't crude shelters but sophisticated rest stops, often built at precise intervals where the day's climb would peak. Excavations at one such ruin near Lalibela uncovered stone troughs designed to collect condensation from nighttime mists, providing water for both travelers and animals. The walls still bear soot marks from fires that burned frankincense as both insect repellent and spiritual offering, mingling practicality with devotion. What's often overlooked is the social infrastructure behind these routes. Inscriptions at major junctions list tolls paid not in coin, but in news travelers were expected to share updates on bandit activity or water sources ahead. At Yaha, archaeologists found a stone tablet detailing a hospitality code. Merchants who sheltered for 3 nights owed stories of distant lands, while those staying longer contributed repairs to the road itself. This wasn't just commerce, it was a cultural exchange woven into the very fabric of travel. Today, fragments of these roads still gleam underfoot, their stones polished to a shine by centuries of passing caravans. Some sections remain in use by local herders, who speak of strange blessings how lost livestock often reappear by following the old resin route's curves. Perhaps there's magic in those angles, or perhaps it's simpler, that roads built with such intimate knowledge of land and body carry wisdom no map can capture. As the scent of wild frankincense trees still perfumes the highland air, these ancient pathways remind us that the best routes aren't those that conquer terrain, but those that converse with it. Rising like ancient spines across Britain's green hills, the Celtic Ridgeways carved paths of practicality and profound celestial significance into the landscape. These weren't just trails worn by countless footsteps, they were meticulously elevated causeways, their raised beds of compacted chalk and gravel standing proud of the surrounding wetlands. Imagine walking these pale ribbons in Bronze Age Britain, your feet staying dry while the lowlands glistened with treacherous bogs on either side. The engineering spoke volumes about Celtic ingenuity. By layering crushed limestone over woven brushwood mats, builders created drainage systems that kept these roads passable even during the rainiest seasons. But the Ridgeway's straight sections reveal something far more mystical. Modern aerial surveys show startling alignment stretches running arrow straight for miles, suddenly kinking at precise angles. Archaeoastronomers mapping these turns made a breathtaking discovery. Many correspond exactly to the summer solstice sunrise when viewed from key hill forts. At Barbury Castle in Wiltshire, one particularly straight segment frames the first gleam of midsummer sun through a natural notch in the distant hills, transforming the entire ridge into a celestial sighting tool. The same roads that carried traders and livestock by day may have guided moonlit processions during sacred festivals, their pale surfaces glowing like ghostly rivers in the darkness. Beneath these pathways lie even deeper secrets. ground-penetrating radar has detected curious deposits of bronze artifacts, swords, and ceremonial cauldrons buried at regular intervals under certain sections. These weren't lost items, they were deliberate offerings, placed where the road crossed invisible energy lines the Celts called dragon paths. Excavations near Avebury uncovered a stunning example. A perfectly preserved bronze shield carefully positioned beneath a ridgeway surface, its placement aligning with both solstice sunrise and a nearby spring regarded as sacred. The message is clear: these roads weren't just transport routes, they were living entities fed by rituals that bound earth to sky, a practical journey to spiritual passage. The materials themselves tell another story. While Roman roads later prioritized imported stone, Celtic builders used whatever local materials resonated with their cosmology. In Cornwall, sections near tin mines incorporate glittering quartz chunks that catch the light like stars. Along the Jurassic coast, fossil-rich limestone slabs were deliberately placed with ammonites, visible spiral symbols of eternity under travelers' feet. Even the vegetation flanking these roads was intentional. Patches of medicinal yarrow and vervain still thrive along ancient verges, suggesting these were more than just weeds, but a living pharmacy for weary travelers. Walking these ridges today, you can still feel their dual nature. The same packed gravel that supported Iron Age cattle drives now crunches under hiking boots, while the solstice alignments still hold true after 3,000 years. At dusk, when long shadows stretch across the downs, it's easy to imagine bronze torches flickering in procession, their light bouncing off the white chalk beneath. The ridgeways remind us that for the Celts, no journey was ever just physical. Every step was a conversation with the land, every mile a verse in an endless poem written in stone and sky. Carving through the punishing deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, the Incense Roads turned one of Earth's most inhospitable landscapes into a thriving corridor of commerce and culture. These weren't just random trails, they were masterclasses in desert survival, meticulously tracing hidden veins of hardpan, those naturally compacted layers of earth that could support the weight of heavily laden camel caravans. While modern travelers might see only endless dunes, ancient merchants read the desert like a living map, following subtle changes in sand texture and color that signaled firmer ground beneath. Recent archaeological work has uncovered astonishing evidence of their navigational precision. At the ruins of Qaryat al-Faw, star charts etched into stone pillars correspond exactly to sections of the Incense Roads where shifting dunes made daytime travel treacherous. These weren't mere decorations, they were functional guides, marking specific constellations that rose over safe passages during critical night journeys. One particularly well-preserved chart depicts Sirius aligned with a narrow canyon shortcut, its appearance signaling the start of the cool season when caravans could push deeper into the desert. The camel carvings found along these routes reveal another layer of sophistication. Far from simple graffiti, these petroglyphs cluster near hidden water sources, their placements encoding vital information. A camel depicted lying down might indicate a resting spot with shade, while one with an exaggerated hump pointed toward seasonal grazing. Some carvings even incorporate notches that cast shadows at precise times of day, functioning as ancient sundials to coordinate caravan departures. At the famous Al-Haya site, a particular sequence of camel images corresponds with underground water channels still used by Bedouin tribes today. What's truly remarkable is how these roads adapted to their environment rather than fighting it. Where Roman engineers would later impose straight lines across landscapes, Arabian traders followed the desert's natural rhythms. Sections of the road near Oman's empty quarter make sudden 15-degree turns to avoid areas where morning winds create dangerous sand vortices. Other stretches incorporate natural windbreaks, strategically placed stone walls that reduced erosion while creating cooling eddies for travelers. Excavations at some of these walls have uncovered residues of frankincense and myrrh, suggesting they also served as ritual spaces where merchants made offerings for safe passage. The materials carried along these roads tell their own story. Resin samples from distant ports still bear microscopic traces of the unique sands found along specific route segments, allowing researchers to reconstruct entire journeys molecule by molecule. At Giza, the legendary well of the lost city of Yubar, archaeologists found leather water bags preserved in the dry air, their stitching patterns varying every 100 miles, as if marking cultural transitions along the way. Today, walking these ancient paths under the same stars that guided Bronze Age merchants, you can still find traces of their passage, fragments of pottery used to measure resin weights, or stones polished smooth by countless ropes tying camels for the night. The real magic lies in realizing these roads required no grand monuments or forced conquest of nature. They thrived through observation, adaptation, and an intimate dialogue with the desert, a conversation written in footprints and constellations that still has wisdom to share about moving through the world with grace. High in the Andes, where condors circle thin air and mountainsides plunge into dizzying ravines, the Quhapacñan, often called the Great Inca Road, defies logic with its sheer audacity. This wasn't just a pathway through the clouds. It was an engineering marvel stitched together with tunnels bored through solid rock, suspension bridges woven from mountain grass, and staircases that scaled cliffs like stone lightning bolts. But what truly set this road apart was its intimate dialogue with the sun. Unlike modern highways that bulldoze through landscapes, the Quhapacñan's angles were carefully calibrated to catch every precious ray of winter sunlight, turning the entire route into a solar thermal system. Take the staircases near Huánuco Pampa, where each step rises at a precise 15-degree angle, not for ease of climbing, but to maximize exposure to the low-hanging winter sun. Archaeologists using 3D modeling discovered these stairs absorbed and retained heat throughout the day, radiating warmth onto travelers' legs during frigid nights. Meanwhile, tunnels along the route weren't just shortcuts. Their entrances were strategically angled to funnel sunlight deep into passageways, creating natural light wells that eliminated the need for torches. The Incas didn't just build a road, they harnessed the mountain itself as a climate control system. Then there were the bridge's engineering feats that left Spanish conquistadors gaping in disbelief. The most famous, a suspension bridge over the Apurimac River, was woven entirely from iku grass, its fibers twisted into cables thicker than a man's torso. Recent tests of replica bridges revealed their secret. The grass's natural elasticity allowed the structure to sway gently under load, distributing weight so efficiently it could support a column of marching soldiers. But the real stroke of genius lay in their placement. These spans often connected sections of road aligned with solstice sunrises, turning crossings into celestial events where light would ignite the entire bridge at dawn like a golden thread. The road's nocturnal magic is even more astonishing. Sections near sacred sites like Pachacamac were painted with crushed quartz and mica, creating a faint luminescence under moonlight. Spanish chroniclers wrote of eerie nights when the Quhapacñan seemed to glow like a river of stars, guiding travelers without a single torch. Modern spectrographic analysis confirms these coatings weren't random. They used minerals that reflected specific lunar phases, brightest during festivals honoring Mama Quilla, the moon goddess. Perhaps the most poignant detail lies in the smallest touches. At rest stops called tambos, walls were often slightly concave to amplify the morning sun's warmth where porters slept. Grooves in paving stones channeled rainwater into ceremonial baths, then onward to terraced fields below. Even the road's width varied, intentionally narrowing at high altitudes to block wind, widening near shrines to accommodate processions. Every element served multiple purposes, blending practicality with poetry. Walking the Quhapak Nyan today, you can still feel this harmony. The same sun that warmed Inca messengers still kisses the stones at dawn, and the same stars that guided them still glitter above the ruins. In a world obsessed with speed, this ancient road whispers a different truth, that the best journeys aren't about racing forward, but moving in rhythm with the Earth's own pulse, one deliberate, sunlit step at a time. Stretching across the Fertile Crescent like veins of a waking giant, the royal roads of Mesopotamia weren't just infrastructure, they were cosmic blueprints etched into the earth. Unlike the winding trails of earlier civilizations, these pathways cut through the landscape with geometric precision, their standardized widths so consistent that archaeologists have used them to reconstruct ancient units of measurement. A surviving clay tablet from Mari reveals the astonishing detail behind their construction. Surveyors used ropes marked at precise intervals to ensure every section matched the royal cubit, a length derived from the forearm of the king himself. But the real magic lay in their celestial alignments. At dawn during the spring equinox, the road from Ur to Nippur transforms into a golden runway, its eastern orientation catching the first light in a way that illuminates the entire path simultaneously, a feat requiring calculations more advanced than previously believed possible for the era. Beneath this apparent simplicity hid layers of sophistication. Excavations near Babylon uncovered terracotta models of road junctions, each one a miniature masterpiece of early urban planning. These weren't just crude representations, they contained precise angle measurements matching constellations from Babylonian star catalogues. The road linking Sippar to Kish, for instance, makes a subtle 15-degree turn that aligns with the rising of Sirius during the Akitu festival, a celestial marker for the new year. Even more remarkably, the models showed drainage systems engineered with slopes calculated to the fraction of a degree, proving these builders understood hydraulic principles centuries before Archimedes. The materials themselves told a story of imperial ambition. While common roads used packed earth, royal highways were paved with bitumen-soaked bricks that shimmered like obsidian under the Mesopotamian sun. Chemical analysis reveals a startling innovation. The bitumen was mixed with crushed pearls and lapis lazuli near temple districts, creating surfaces that glittered with symbolic stars underfoot. A hymn from the reign of Shulgi boasts how these roads carried the heavens downward, allowing kings and gods to walk the same gleaming paths. What truly set these roads apart was their role as information networks. Courier stations spaced exactly 6 baru, about 6 modern miles, apart, housed messengers who could relay orders across the empire in days rather than weeks. At each station, archivists kept clay tablets recording everything from tax revenues to omens, an early form of bureaucratic data logging. The angles of these stations weren't arbitrary either. Their doorways aligned with Venus's extreme positions in the night sky, turning routine message delivery into a celestial ritual. Walking these routes today, you can still find fragments of their grandeur, bits of lapis-studded pavement, or the occasional surveyor's mark worn smooth by millennia of wind. But the real legacy isn't in the stones, it's in the realization that 5,000 years ago, humans were already mapping the cosmos onto the earth, turning humble roads into instruments of both power and wonder. The royal roads didn't just connect cities, they wove time, space, and divinity into a single ribbon of packed earth and ambition, proving that even the most practical paths can carry the weight of the heavens. Radiating outward from the heart of anchor-like stone arteries, the Khmer Empire's sacred causeways transformed simple journeys into transcendental experiences. These weren't just functional bridges between temples, they were carefully calibrated instruments of illusion, designed to dissolve the boundary between earth and heaven. Picture approaching Angkor Wat at dawn. As your feet touch the laterite slabs of the Western Causeway, the temple's 5 iconic towers would suddenly multiply, their perfect reflections shimmering in the moat's still waters. This doubling effect wasn't accidental. Laser scans of the site reveal the causeway's angle, precisely 17 degrees from north, was calculated to align the reflection with the actual towers during equinox sunrises, creating a momentary vision of 10 towers instead of 5. The message was unmistakable. You weren't just walking toward a temple, but stepping into a mirrored realm where the divine and mortal worlds touched. The engineering behind this aquatic symmetry reveals staggering precision. The causeway's edges were lined with Naga balustrades, serpentine figures, whose undulating bodies created microcurrents that stabilized the water's surface. At certain points, the road's elevation dips almost imperceptibly, slowing rainwater runoff to prevent ripples during critical viewing periods. Archaeologists studying the moats discovered another secret. Their depths varied in sync with the causeway's angles. Where the reflection effect was most important, workers dug the basin to exactly 2.5 meters, a depth that eliminated wave distortion, while allowing the lotus plants growing below to tint the water with a sacred golden hue at sunrise. What's often overlooked is how these roads functioned as spiritual timekeepers. The causeway to Bayon Temple incorporates 7 subtle turns, each corresponding to a day of the week in Khmer cosmology. During the dry season, sunlight would illuminate different bas-reliefs along the inner walls at specific hours, marking prayer times like a stone sundial. Meanwhile, the road to Ta Prohm was deliberately built slightly off-center from its moat, an intentional flaw that created staggered reflections during monsoon season, symbolizing the imperfect nature of human perception compared to divine perfection. The materials themselves held cosmic significance. Sections near Banti Esray incorporate pink sandstone flecked with mica, causing the entire roadway to sparkle under moonlight like the Milky Way. At Precon, the causeway's foundation contains iron-rich laterite stones that subtly vibrated during earthquakes, warning travelers of impending tremors long before they could be felt. Even the gaps between paving stones were purposeful, exactly 2 fingers wide, allowing rainwater to drain while creating a rhythmic sound underfoot that matched traditional walking meditation chants. Walking these causeways today, the magic still lingers. When the light hits just right, those ancient calculations spring back to life, and for a fleeting moment, the towers duplicate as they did centuries ago. It's a testament to a civilization that didn't just build roads, but engineered portals where every angle, every material, every drop of water conspired to remind travelers that the sacred wasn't just a destination, but the very act of journeying itself. Across the vast Pacific, where horizons stretch uninterrupted for thousands of miles, Polynesian navigators charted highways not of stone or dirt, but of stars, waves, and whispers of ancestral knowledge. These star paths etched into memory rather than Earth allowed voyagers to traverse ocean distances that would daunt modern sailors even with GPS. Picture this, a double-hulled canoe slicing through midnight swells, its sail catching trade winds as a navigator lies on his back, reading the night sky like a celestial map. The angle of the Southern Cross above the horizon, the precise point where specific stars rise and set, these weren't just observations but mathematical calculations performed without instruments, guiding crews to islands smaller than a pixel on most maps. What set these routes apart was their multidimensional nature. While other cultures mapped land-based roads, Polynesian wayfinding integrated 3 simultaneous navigation systems. The stars provided fixed reference points, but only at night. By day, navigators interpreted ocean swells the way waves refract around islands, creating patterns detectable miles out to sea. A trained eye could feel these subtle shifts through the canoe's hull, sensing land long before it appeared visually. Bird behavior offered another layer. Certain species, like the Monu Ku white tern, fly out to sea at dawn and return at dusk, their flight paths forming natural compass arrows toward land. The true marvel lies in how this knowledge was preserved. Without written records, Polynesians encoded navigation data into chants and stories, their rhythms mirroring the cadence of star movements. A single chant might list dozens of stars in sequence, their names signaling not just direction but seasonal changes. In the Hawaiian Cumulipo creation chant, the line, "The starry eyes of the night are opened," refers to the rising of Hoculaire Arcturus, a key marker for voyages between Tahiti and Hawaii. Modern experiments proved these oral maps astonishingly precise. When the Hoculaire canoe recreated the historic route in 1976 using traditional methods alone, it arrived within miles of its target after 34 days at sea. Today, this ancient science reveals even deeper sophistication. Researchers analyzing wave pilot techniques discovered navigators could detect islands up to 50 miles away by interpreting interference patterns in ocean swells, a skill modern physics struggles to model. Meanwhile, the star compass used by Marshallese navigators divides the horizon into 32 segments, each associated with specific stars and swells, creating a mental GPS updated in real time. Even bird lore held hidden precision. The Tau Islanders of Samoa knew that frigatebirds never fly into headwinds, so their presence always indicated a tailwind path home. Perhaps the most poignant testament to these star paths is their revival. After nearly vanishing under colonial rule, traditional wayfinding is experiencing a renaissance. Schools from New Zealand to California now teach star compass navigation, blending ancestral wisdom with ocean conservation. On night watches during modern voyages, you might hear navigators softly chanting the same star sequences their ancestors used, voices merging with the wind as if the ocean itself remembers these ancient roads. The star paths remind us that some highways leave no trace yet never fade, written not in earth or stone, but in the boundless dialogue between humans and the cosmos. Beneath the endless twilight of Siberia's frozen plains, the earth still remembers the weight of creatures long vanished, mammoths whose footsteps carved highways into the permafrost so deep they guided human travelers for millennia after. These ancient trails, some over 15,000 years old, aren't just frozen footprints but intricate ecological maps. The angles at which they cut across the tundra tell a story of survival, tracing precise routes between seasonal grazing grounds, salt licks, and sheltered valleys free of lethal winter winds. What looks like random zigzags to the untrained eye reveals startling intelligence when overlaid with modern climate data. The paths consistently follow the edges of prehistoric thermal springs, where steam rising through the snow created life-saving microclimates. One particularly well-preserved trail in Yakutia shows how mammoth engineering anticipated obstacles humans would later struggle with. The route descends a steep riverbank not directly, but in a series of gentle switchbacks at exactly 22-degree angles, the optimal slope for massive creatures to navigate without slipping. Remarkably, these same paths became vital corridors for early humans, their worn grooves naturally channeling meltwater away in spring to create stable walking surfaces. Archaeologists have found Neanderthal tools clustered along these trails, suggesting our ancestors literally followed in the mammoth's footsteps. harvesting abandoned tusks and bones that littered the routes like prehistoric rest stops. The real breakthrough came when researchers analyzed the trail's star-like convergence points. Satellite imagery reveals hubs where multiple paths met at consistent 55-degree angles, forming geometric patterns invisible from ground level. These weren't random intersections, they marked prime gathering spots where mammoth herds instinctively congregated during storms, their bodies forming living windbreaks. Centuries later, these same hubs became trading centers for Paleolithic hunters, then Bronze Age merchants transporting walrus ivory along routes their Ice Age predecessors had unknowingly surveyed. Some trails hold even darker secrets. Near the Barilek River, a path suddenly veers 90 degrees toward what appears to be a dead end, until permafrost melt exposed a catastrophic sinkhole filled with thousands of mammoth skeletons. The trail's abrupt turn now reads as a desperate detour around a mass grave, the event frozen in time by the very ice that preserved the road itself. Today, climate change is revealing these frozen highways anew as the tundra thaws. In some places, the compacted soil of the trails resists erosion better than surrounding ground, leaving them raised like ghostly ridges. Helicopter pilots in remote regions still use them as natural landing strips, unaware they're touching down on roads built by creatures who walked the earth when glaciers still shaped continents. The Mammoth Trails remind us that the oldest roads weren't built, they were earned step by heavy step, by beings who mapped the land not with compasses, but with generations of accumulated wisdom written into the earth itself. The vast golden sea of the Sahara hides one of history's most astonishing road networks, routes so perfectly adapted to their environment. They turned the world's most brutal desert into a thriving artery of commerce. These Trans-Saharan Trails weren't just lines in the sand, they were masterclasses in survival, their winding paths tracing an invisible logic known only to generations of Tuareg guides. Picture a caravan of camels, each beast laden with slabs of salt mined from the heart of the desert, plodding toward distant kingdoms where this precious mineral would be traded weight for weight with gold. The real miracle wasn't the cargo, it was the journey itself, a months-long odyssey across dunes that could swallow cities, guided by nothing but memory and stars. What made these routes extraordinary was their intimate dance with the desert's whims. Unlike Roman roads that imposed straight lines on landscapes, the Trans-Saharan Trails curved like serpents, their angles meticulously avoiding unstable ergs, shifting dune fields that could bury entire caravans overnight. Recent satellite imaging reveals how these paths consistently traced the edges of hidden water tables, their meanders matching underground aquifers too deep for wells but shallow enough to support the occasional acacia tree. These living signposts, their roots drinking from ancient reservoirs, became waypoints in an otherwise featureless expanse. At Timbuktu, archaeologists have unearthed 12th-century guidebooks written on camel skin, detailing routes by listing these trees in sequence, a vegetative map where each gnarled trunk functioned like a mile marker. The Tuaregs' celestial navigation techniques border on supernatural. Without compasses or written charts, they relied on stars whose movements were encoded in oral poetry passed down through generations. Certain verses, when recited, correlated with specific star positions at different times of night. A line about the silver scorpion's tail might signal to turn 15 degrees northwest when the constellation Scorpius reached its zenith. Modern astronomers studying these traditions made a startling discovery. The angles between resting spots often matched the declination of key stars, creating a kind of astronomical stepping stone pattern across the desert. At the Well of Arawan, where 5 major routes converged, stone pillars align with the winter solstice sunrise, suggesting the site doubled as a celestial calendar for coordinating caravan departures. But the true genius of these roads lay in their social infrastructure. Rest stops called Causeways weren't just places to sleep. They were sophisticated trading hubs where gossip and market prices flowed as freely as water. The angles of their walls weren't arbitrary. Slightly concave surfaces created shade patterns that moved like sundials, indicating optimal times for negotiations. Salt slabs from Taudeni still bear chisel marks indicating not just weight, but the road segment they traveled, allowing merchants to calculate tolls based on distance. At Giza, the legendary salt mining center, excavations revealed a network of underground chambers where guides left messages for following caravans scratched onto salt bricks in Tifinagh script. These notes warned of bandits or pointed to hidden springs. Today, fragments of these roads survive in the most unexpected ways. Satellite photos show faint trails where the Sahara's crust remains compacted centuries after the last camel passed. In Mauritania's Adrar region, the same stars that guided medieval caravans still shine over abandoned salt depots, their angles unchanged since Mansa Musa's golden pilgrimage to Mecca. And perhaps most remarkably, the Tuareg star poems still hold power during a 2011 rebellion. Rebels evaded modern tracking systems by navigating moonless nights using verses unchanged from their ancestors. These desert highways remind us that the most enduring roads aren't those that conquer nature, but those that listen to it, where every dune avoided, every star charted, and every acacia remembered wove survival into something like art. Hidden within the angles of these ancient roads lies a forgotten language of the land, a code written not in words, but in the precise tilt of stones toward celestial events, the careful lean of a pathway toward hidden springs, or the strategic curve away from deadly desert winds. Take the Nazca Lines in Peru, where certain pathways align with the June solstice sunrise at exact 60-degree angles, transforming barren desert into a sprawling astronomical calendar. Or consider the Roman Via Appia's subtle 1-degree incline, invisible to the naked eye yet calculated to channel rainwater into drainage ditches without eroding the surface. These weren't happy accidents. They were the products of generations observing nature's rhythms and encoding them into stone. The sacred geometry of these roads often served dual purposes. In Egypt, the causeway to the Great Pyramid angles precisely 26 degrees, not just to mirror Orion's belt, but to leverage gravity's pull, helping workers haul massive limestone blocks uphill. Meanwhile, the zigzagging Inca trails climbing Andean peaks weren't merely avoiding cliffs. Their switchbacks followed Fibonacci-like sequences, distributing the climb's strain evenly across travelers' muscles. Even the width of Celtic Ridgeways reflected cosmic math. Many measure exactly 3 times the local Druid's standard pace, a unit derived from lunar cycle calculations. Military strategy shaped angles too. Persia's royal road curved gently around mountain passes where ambushes were likely, while the straightaways allowed couriers to spot threats miles ahead. In Japan, feudal lords designed castle approaches with abrupt 80-degree turns to slow invading forces, a trick later borrowed by European castle builders. But perhaps the most ingenious were the Minones roads of Crete, where ceremonial pathways widened at intervals matching the stride of bull leapers during rituals, their surfaces slightly springy to cushion falls. What's truly humbling is how these cultures achieved such precision without modern tools. Polynesian star paths relied on memorized chants correlating star positions with wave patterns, while Native American trails used tree species as living compasses. Birch bark's grain always grows straighter on a tree's southern side. The Carthaginians even engineered their desert roads to amplify nighttime cooling. Dark basalt stones placed at specific angles radiated daytime heat faster, creating temperature differentials that generated subtle breezes for nighttime travelers. These angles whisper a profound truth that ancient road builders saw landscapes as living maps where every slope, star, and seasonal shift held meaning. Modern highway engineers are now rediscovering their wisdom, using LiDAR to study how Inca roads avoided erosion or how Roman surfaces self-repaired. The next time you drive down a straight freeway, remember, our ancestors might have chosen a different path, one that bent with the earth rather than against it, where every curve held a conversation with the cosmos. From Babylon to the Andes, these 30 ancient roads form a silent testament to human brilliance, a proof that long before the wheel, civilizations were already mapping the heavens onto the earth and weaving meaning into every mile. The angles of these pathways weren't accidents. They were living textbooks encoding celestial cycles in stone, whispering directions through the tilt of a slope, or guiding travelers with the very stars underfoot. Think of the Inca engineers who carved stairways into mountainsides, their steps calibrated to catch the winter sun's warmth, or the Mesopotamian surveyors who aligned roads with solstice sunrises, turning entire cities into sundials. These weren't just feats of engineering, they were acts of reverence, conversations between cultures and the cosmos. Yet for all we've uncovered, these roads still guard mysteries. Why did the Nazca Lines trace angles that only make sense from the air? How did Polynesian navigators memorize star paths with such precision that even modern software struggles to replicate their accuracy? Every discovery peels back another layer, revealing how ancient minds perceived space and time in ways we're only beginning to grasp. The Carthaginian desert routes, for instance, followed hidden water tables with an intuition that feels almost supernatural, while the Minones built roads that doubled as musical instruments, their surfaces tuned to amplify sacred chants. What's most humbling is realizing how much we've forgotten. Modern roads prioritize speed and efficiency, but these ancient pathways teach a different lesson: that the journey itself holds meaning. Whether it's the Songlines of Australia, where every landmark holds a story, or the sacred ways of Greece, where pilgrims walked in rhythm with the Earth's own heartbeat, these routes remind us that mobility isn't just about distance, it's about connection. So the next time you walk a straight city street, pause for a moment. Imagine it curving to greet the sunrise or rising gently to meet a mountain's contour. Somewhere beneath the asphalt, the old roads still whisper. Their secrets aren't lost, just waiting for those willing to listen. What do you think these ancient builders would make of our highways today? Drop your thoughts below, and if you've enjoyed unraveling these historical mysteries with us, hit subscribe to keep the journey alive. The past has more stories to tell, and we're